All right. Hello, everybody. It is Ding Dong Darkness time. I'm Allison Dixon. And today I have a friend with me in, I guess, the studio because we were sitting here in the same room.
Across a table.
In my dining room. The Ding Dong Darkness Dining Dungeon.
Oh.
Yes.
Dim Deesdo.
And it's proper to say dungeon because we are kind of going to talk about something today that involves subterranean darkness.
Yes.
Horror.
A descent into the dark caverns of mystery and a parallel descent, if you will, to madness.
I feel like Peter Griffin in Family Guy in that bit when he's like, haha, they said it. Like when they say the title of the movie in the movie.
All right, it's time to make the descent.
They said it, yeah. But yeah, so if you haven't already figured it out, we are talking about the film, the 2005 horror masterpiece, The Descent. And why are we talking about this exactly?
Because it's freaking amazing.
Yeah.
It's such a great horror movie. I mean, I'm going to have some quibbles with it. I do with most horror movies. However, they're just few and far between. There's so much great stuff about this movie in terms of the atmosphere, the tone. It's set so well. It's all these badass women spelunking or cave diving. They don't ever really use the term spelunking. I don't know if that's accurate. I don't know.
Yeah, I think spelunking can sometimes refer to like the sea diving part of, like the swimming part of cave exploration, possibly. I don't know.
It's such a fun word.
The people out there who know, who are listening and screaming at their radios, maybe they can correct us.
Actually, spelunking refers to a specific subset. Yeah, exactly. But no, it has a lot of interesting makings. And I think, the more I learned about the movie, the more I realized that the director, Neil Marshall,
yes,
how this all kind of came together, both his style, which is not only his ideas, but the way that he took ideas from other people to incorporate it into a movie, and where he got a lot of his inspirations from, I think was really fascinating. And there's just something about this movie that is horror magic.
Isn't this an A24 movie studio, like the studio, like Hereditary and
good question.
Midsummer and all that?
Don't actually know. Do we need to do an on-air
fact check? I think we might, only because I was watching some different film analysis of this in my research leading up to this episode, and people were mentioning A24, and I mentioned that because this movie seems to deal with a lot of the same themes that some of those most popular films deal with, especially the grief trauma element of horror, and also just the phobias that it calls to, claustrophobia especially, but isolation, fear of the dark, so many different things. It's almost like Marshall sees all these things that we all relate to on a deeply visceral level and decided, hey, we're going to put it all in here, and then we're going to ramp it up and make it even worse by making it kind of a creature feature as well.
Right.
And so kind of brilliant. And I got to ask you too, because I honestly don't know this about you. I'm not even just asking for the benefit of the audience, but do you have any claustrophobia?
No, not just sort of categorically. I think there are certain circumstances where I might feel a little confined, but largely speaking, no, I don't have.
Yeah, because you've been cave exploring and a little
not
bit.
Like this, but yeah. Right. Been like the ape caves down by Mount St. Helens. It's a very well-traversed area, but there's some tight squeezes and places that you kind of go through. That what they're doing is ultimately way more extreme than what I would ever do.
Oh, it's really funny because I think I remember one of the characters, Juno, and we'll mention her a lot in this. And she is the more headstrong, kind of badass. Well, they're all badasses in their own way, but she's definitely like the more alpha, for lack of a better word, kind of personality of the group.
She's the friend that will coordinate everything, pull the people together. She's done the scouting. She's done the research. She knows where you're going. Like, she's the one that's like, hey, I'm going to take charge. Y'all come with me. We're going to go on this great adventure.
She wants the real thing, like, because I think she mentioned something about we're not doing something with a fucking handrail.
Oh, that was Holly. That's Holly.
Yeah, okay.
Holly's one like gift shops and fucking handrails.
Yeah, and when you think of like something like Ape Cave, or some of the caverns here in Ohio. We have a whole host of caverns you can visit here in this state. And when you think about some of these caves or things that a lot of tourists can visit, even those can be a little creepy. I mean, Indiana has a lot of caves as well. Been to a haunted cave there. It's this haunted attraction that they have in a real cave in Lewisburg, Indiana, which is just over the Ohio border. Over the border from Ohio. And it is not like that. The kind of cave that these ladies are venturing into is basically untouched by most other humans. And it is absolutely the sort of cave that most people would not attempt unless you are kind of very experienced. And even then, they're kind of like, most of these other ladies are like, whoa, what the hell? This isn't even much for us.
Would it be the production companies?
Yes.
This is Celador Films, Northman Productions, Path UK.
Oh, okay.
So it may be a different...
It is not an A24 movie. Okay, well, it feels like one. And those movies didn't really start picking up in popularity until really the 2010s. And this is kind of early. This is, again, 2005. So, and I'll say, from my own experience, I also am not very claustrophobic in general. I don't mind a tight space. I've had, I think, an MRI isn't fun, but I don't have phobias associated with that. Like, I could lay in the MRI machine, and as long as I just close my eyes and listen to the music, it's fine.
Right.
But for the most part, I think I prefer more of a closed space as opposed to one that's too open. So
the agoraphobia.
I'm a little more agoraphobic than claustrophobic. Yeah. So, but this movie made me find my inner claustrophobe. It really brought to bear. It was like, okay, we all maybe have a little bit of something, but this movie, it made me find it. I felt very cloistered. I felt very tight, like in the doom. I think that's really what it is, and this feeling that they are not going to get out. So we'll get back to that later, but I think I wanted to set the stage because this movie, even if you find that this is not your jam in terms of what scares you, I think it'll get to you. It'll find its way in and tickle that button in your brain.
Yeah, and it's also just a well-made movie. It's well-produced, it's well shot, it looks great, the acting is great. So great. Yes, it's horror, and, sometimes horror has the trappings of being schlocky or cheesy or, kind of grindhouse, slasher fests and whatnot. But there's, cinematography here, which is very, very well done. Good. And it's all being done at the hands of a very capable and understanding director. Yeah. Which is great.
Yeah.
And so I think it's one of those things where I think it's a good movie in its own right, let alone the trappings of the genre, which are, sometimes not seen as being high film, right?
Yeah.
It's horror. It's in its own little category versus, your typical mainstream or your standard genres, if you will.
I think the horror is often at its best when it does find a way to tap into very deep humanity and really kind of bring that out. And the movie starts off, I would say the pacing of this thing is even pretty brilliant. It doesn't waste much time bringing you in. You start off, within the first 5 minutes of this thing, a horrible trauma befalls the main character, Sarah, and she loses her husband and daughter in a horrific car accident. And she's really in, of course, an understandably very dark place when this happens, but she's got, the girlfriend group kind of sort of rallying around her. However, there's a dynamic at play in this group. And that is, they're all, and maybe we've all experienced this. And again, this is where I think Neil Marshall found a way to tap into human experience that I think we can all relate to, is that this group, they grew up together, they went to college together, they had a lot of adventures together, but they're all kind of growing apart. They're kind of going their own way. Sarah went off and got a family and, got married and wanted to have that domestic life. And some, like Juno was the closest friend to her, and was she's the one who wants to hold the group together. She wants to, keep doing the adventure. She doesn't want to give up that, the times that they all had together. And they all kind of have that similar tension. And it's kind of uncomfortable. I think if you've ever been through that, like that group you came up with, you start to drift. If you ever had friends that you grew up with, that now you and I, we've known each other a long time, and we still talk to, like, we have our friend Corey and, Aaron and all that. Like, we all hang together. We've been hanging together all week with Chris being here on vacation.
Yeah.
But it is something I think we can all relate to on some level. And then that just makes it even more like you're involved emotionally from the get-go.
Yeah, you can kind of empathize, even if you're not doing it consciously, of like, oh, you have these friend groups and, at times you're close, at times you're not. People move away. And so, and usually there's that person who tries to bring everyone together and wants to not recreate the old times, but continue doing what ultimately probably brought everyone together. And in this case, it's extreme sports. So, when the movie starts off, they're going down some like class 4 or 5 rapids on a raft, and it's just 3 of them. And then it leads to the scene where you're talking about, where this is the only man in the movie is her husband, and he is killed within the first 3 or 4 minutes. And you don't see another man in this movie, and I think that was brilliant.
I agree.
And I don't think a lot of movies would have the courage to do that, which it feels weird to say that that's courageous.
Right. It shouldn't be.
Because we can have all men casts where women are nothing more than an object of discussion or whatever, right? Like we can watch The Dirty Dozen. We can watch, any of these movies where it's like, you wouldn't think about it.
No.
You probably wouldn't even notice unless you stopped yourself. And so I like that Neil decided to take that, I guess you could say, risk. Again, it sounds foolish to call it a risk.
It was such a risk at that time that later on, there was a movie that came out over a decade or around a decade later called The Ritual on Netflix that feels almost identical, at least in the start, but it's a man group. They're not in a cave, they're exploring a forest, and there's a bunch of weird stuff that happens. But it starts off again like a very traumatic event that brings it, the one man back in, and they all kind of go on this sort of bro-tastic adventure to Norway or something. What is it about the Scandinavian countries that you go to after a traumatic event? I don't recommend it, guys. If anything horrible happens to you, do not.
Do you not know the birthplace of true crime fiction?
Right. Do not let your first thought be, I'm going to Sweden. I'm going to Finland. Just don't. But yeah, it's grounded like immediately. I remember seeing this film. I saw it in the theater when it came out. And I went in very cold. I didn't know really. I mean, I saw the pictures, the posters, very evocative poster that's almost like imagining like horror meets Tomb Raider is kind of what it looked like to me, because she, this woman, she's kind of like this badass woman in like a tank top. She's covered in blood, and she's screaming to the heavens, and I'm like, oh my god, this looks terrifying, I must see it. And so I just went. I was not prepared to immediately be brought in, because with a horror movie I come in with very low expectations, and I'm like, you're gonna have to do a lot to really move the needle for me. And immediately I was in it, and feeling that tension just between the group, and in particular between Sarah and Juno, because that's definitely seems to be who it focuses on in terms of all the women in the movie, of course, have very distinctive personalities. They have their own, how many? There are 5?
6.
There are 6, that's right. And they all feel very distinctive. And that's another thing I really liked about it. He really allowed them to explore their own personalities. There is like the uber badass. There is the kind of the funny one, the one that's funnier than the others. But that's kind of the case in all friend groups, right?
Yeah, and you have a big sister, little sister combo. And so you have the different dynamics at play, and you have the different personalities. But, they're all getting along. Like, there's not really many points of contention. I mean, you have different personalities at play, but it doesn't play into like the female stereotypes of women groups together kind of a thing. I felt like it really smartly avoided that.
That was the brilliant part. He didn't say like we have to say all these things or have these little bickery moments. And really, once shit hits the fan, once they're in the middle of the movie, every reaction feels very expected. It feels authentic. It doesn't feel forced in any way. And there isn't like, these little fake little conflicts that they're throwing in there. It's just like, you just get the sense that, they're all carrying the baggage of some kind. Which is just, again, It's brilliant and smart, and it treats the audience as a smart individual too. So
honestly, I feel like some of that's a UK sensibility, not going to lie.
No,
I feel like if
you're
it was
right.
done by an American actors, studio, director, whatever, I feel like you might get a different sensibility. And so I feel like we're getting some of the benefits of having.
And we'll talk when we get to the ending about the American sensibility that found its way into this movie. The cave itself is a character. And immediately you get that sense of like person versus environment dynamic. They are they're in a tight spot.
We're in a tight spot.
Many tight spots. This is a tough cave. They're getting a sense immediately, like this is beyond like the level I think that a lot of them are anticipated.
Do we want to set the stage a little bit before they get there?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay,
right.
Yeah. So, we've talked about our two main characters, and as you mentioned, there's a little bit of tension, and you also get a sense that there's maybe something between Juno and Sarah's husband.
Yes.
I don't believe it's ever mentioned.
It is not, but the way that she grieved over him is a really interesting
so she kind of disappears from Sarah's life. I think did she leave the funeral quickly? We don't know this other than through dialogue, because we have the accident. And then it basically jumps, a year or so later, where Juno's trying to get this group back. But we know that there's some falling out there. And Beth is one of the characters who's with them on this rafting trip. And she notices this little interaction. Like, we see her seeing this reaction between the husband and Juno. And it's like they're talking. And then I think he's like helping her undo her helmet. It's something very innocuous, right? They're not like whispering in the shadows or playful touching. It's very understated. But the fact that Beth notices and just looks at it, we notice.
Like there's a tenderness moment. And that's the other thing about the cinematography of this movie and the way that it uses the shots to do that in those POV shots in that very voyeuristic way, like somebody's watching. And even like later in the film, when, there are the way that these shots are filmed is it sometimes does feel like it's a POV shot, but you just don't know who's POV. So I love how if Beth focuses on something and notices that naturally we are supposed to have that trickle of, something's going on. Yeah. Now, even if nothing was going on between them, there is definitely the sense that maybe she had feelings for him or, and even if they weren't acted upon.
And the thing is, it's like, there's a terminology for something you add to an experience that isn't there. This happens in games a lot, and now I can't remember what it's called. But there's a terminology about that wherein a game sense, they don't have to provide the gameplay, you fill in the gap.
Yeah.
But I think it works similarly with this movie and others, of course, wherein we never see Sarah recognize that moment. But we can infer that maybe she's aware that has gone on before.
True.
So it's this interesting thing where Beth never pulls her aside and is like, I just saw something that made me feel weird.
Yeah.
But they get in the car and then they're like, we need to have a talk about something. And then suddenly they have a head-on collision with a truck and a pipe goes through her husband's head.
Yeah.
And impales their daughter in the backseat. We haven't talked about her, I don't think.
Yeah.
So basically in this blink of a moment, she's lost her husband and her daughter in this awful crash. And again, nothing is stated, but you have a sense that there's a little bit of tension. But we don't know. And I tried to pay attention. I don't think we ever get anything after that. Again, I think that's a UK sensibility. It is, I feel like in American hands, it would have been over-explained or spoon-fed a little bit more. And I love that it didn't. We need more of this kind of storytelling because we don't have to treat the audience like they're dumb. And, I like your point about saying that earlier. And then we jump ahead and it's basically everyone's coming together for this trip. I think they're all British, right? Juno doesn't have a British accent though. I know the actor does.
Right. And Marshall told each of them to develop their own accent.
Yeah, I think they either it was naturally their accent or whatever. And part of it was to help differentiate the characters because, we don't get a lot of, a lot of movies or whatever, like they'll say the person's name to help you remember who they are. You don't have a lot of time for that in this movie.
No.
So it is kind of it's a movie shorthand. Well, if this person's hair is different or this person's accent is different, you can it helps you know who's who, especially like a lot of the lighting that they do down in the cave is natural lighting. It's coming from their headlamp. It's coming from their flares or glow stick. If it's not that, there's not a lot of outside lighting. So they try to do it naturalistically. So you don't have clear shots of everybody all the time.
Which is just brilliant because there's so many movies with multiple people in the cast that I've watched a lot that I sometimes still struggle to remember names and everything. But this movie, even many years later, I can still at least remember the names of at least the two main one. Well, Sarah and Juno especially, because it really, even in an ensemble, you kind of like still focus kind of on a pair more than the others, just to give the movie a little bit of tightness. But yeah, I mean, I love how, in spite of all that, they differentiated very effectively. Yeah. And again, speaks again to how well written and developed this script is. And but yeah, they never say it again. And it isn't much longer, right, before they start, because then they have to convince Sarah to even go on this thing.
I think maybe, I think she's reluctant because she's still grieving. And I think there's still hard feelings between her and Juno, or she just hasn't seen her in a long time, and they left kind of on questionable terms.
Yeah.
So they convince everyone to join up, and then that's where, we're at a cabin. It's in the Appalachian Mountains.
Yeah.
And we meet all the other characters. And so you have Becca and Sam. Becca's the older sister of the two. And Becca kind of feels to me like the responsible one.
Yes.
She's the one that's like, and she's not being bossy about it, but she's the one that's like, we do things by the book. We do things safely. And she's kind of teaching her younger sister, Sam, about that. And Sam's she's fun. She's just like up for anything. And just a good dynamic between them. You kind of get the sisterly dynamic. Beth is the one that was on the trip with them. She's harder to categorize for me. I guess she's kind of like the loyal friend.
Yes.
Like she's the one that's there for her friends, and a little more understated, but I feel like that's the best way I can kind of conceptualize her.
I think that's totally fair. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're on the right track so far with how you define them.
And then Holly's the wild card. She's the outrageous one. She's the one that doesn't.
She's the Charlie Day.
Wild card. She's the one that doesn't want the fucking handrails. She's she's the one that's up for the absolute adventure and maybe willing to take risks.
Yes. Yes.
And of course, like I said, Juno's sort of the leader. And then Sarah, the main protagonist, is kind of our every person.
She is the audience surrogate, I think, for lack of a better word. Yeah. When you saddle her with the biggest emotional baggage of everybody, you're the one looking out for her. And of course, she's going through some stuff.
Yeah. This
movie can almost just be seen as a metaphor for how she processes and deals with this grief that she's been through. Have we covered all of them? We covered all the
that's all the
players?
That's the cast. And then I just want to say, like, when you're in the cabin, it's the night before, there's a lot of fun, there's laughing, there's drinking, there's a lot of energy.
Yes.
And I can just say, if you've ever gone on like a long adventure out in the woods with friends, that excitement. And it could be about anything where friends get together. It could be just like a guy or girls weekend where you're all in a house together. You definitely get that sense of excitement and enthusiasm. They probably overindulge a bit. And then the next morning, everyone feels like ass, but they all got to get up and, get ready because we're going to this cave.
Right
away. I can't remember the name of it, the one they're supposed to go to, but basically it's been scouted out. It's in a guidebook.
Yeah.
But you start to see that Juno's maybe not being fully forthcoming.
She is not. Yeah.
And what I love about this is they get in their two vehicles and they start driving, and it's this beautiful overhead shots. It's probably drone shots of just looking straight down at all of these massive trees.
Yeah.
And you see the cars on the road, and then you see them go off the main road onto a Forest Service road. And that resonates with me so much because I've done that so often.
Yes.
Where you feel like this is where I start to leave civilization behind.
And there is just something particularly creepy about the Appalachians. There's something about, it is the oldest mountain range in the country. One of the oldest that predates the Rockies. I mean, this is ancient land here. And, I've been through the Rockies, been through the Cascades, I've explored a lot of mountains in this country, not to this extent. Chris has been through a lot more mountain hiking, but there's something particularly haunted and foreboding about that particular area.
Well, and add to the fact that it is shot so amazingly. It's overcast.
Yes.
And everything is washed in gray blue.
Yeah, that whole aspect, which I love about it, because I do believe that this was filmed on film stock. And so when you see that bluish cast in a film, it's typically because they left the silver nitrate in the film. That's what gives it that bluish cast.
Okay.
And so when they make that choice to do that, and it gives it that real saturated or desaturated look, great device. I love seeing that being used. And that, again, speaking to the wonderful cinematography in this movie. And so just there isn't a moment really through any of it through this point that we're already not feeling a sense of dread.
It's doing a lot of background work that we're not, it's again, very understated. So you don't even realize it's happening, but the sense of dread hits before you even set foot in a cave, before you even drop down into it. And so they're blasting down this Forest Service road, and it does these really clever cuts at different points. They're driving fast. They're all jostling around in there. I would not drive that fast on a Forest Service road. My goodness. But, but again, it conveys this sense that they are really off the beaten path.
Oh, yeah.
They're not a mile in from the road,
No.
the main road. They are back there. And they're not even off of a main road. They're off of some mountain road that's probably a paved 2-laner, one each direction. So again, you get this sense that they're in the middle of nowhere and they finally arrive at their destination. This is all it speaks to me because I've done this kind of stuff before so often, going on these backpacking trips where you get out of the car, you're really excited, but you're like, okay, it's for real now.
Yeah.
And you see Juno, she takes the book of hikes or whatever, she chucks it into the glove box.
Yeah. And at this point, we don't know what to make of her, right? She's starting to feel a little like a villain. I mean, we already have this notion that she had a little something going on with Sarah's husband. Mm-hmm. And then we see her doing this. Yeah. And it's like, are you trying to sabotage this group? What is going on here? You feel just a stone drop in your gut. Oh, here we go. Mm-hmm. And again, that quiet ratcheting up of the tension before we even get into the damn cave.
Yeah. And they're taking a hike through, and then, it's something as simple as they come across I think it's a carcass of an animal, it's a big animal.
Right.
It's supposed to be a moose. I don't even think there are moose in that area, but maybe there are.
Yeah. I mean, or some elk or big.
Elk, maybe. Yeah. Elk's probably more like it. So you see, and again, it's an elk carcass. You're out in nature. You're going to see that. But for some reason, it's just remember, dread.
Yes. Dead things.
We don't know why, but we're going to add a little something there. And then they get to the cave, and it's a giant hole in the ground. Mm-hmm. In your mind, you're like, okay, they're going to walk up. There's going to be a rock slab or wall with an opening in it. We can all imagine what that looks like. Nope, we're dropping down. Our first step in is a descent.
Yes.
And it is shot so awesomely. It's like this cave mouth, and they all rappel down into it, and there's a waterfall that's sort of trickling down into it.
And there's
it's
the light.
There's a beam of light. Mm-hmm. And it's just so beautiful, and they all come down there. Of course, Holly's tearing ass through there and slams down. Careful, We're getting the dynamics already at play.
Yeah.
And Sarah's just she does a lot of this in the first part of the movie, which drove me a little bit crazy. She's just staring at things and looking around something doesn't look right here. But in this case, she sees a handprint in the stone. And so you're like, okay.
That's interesting.
Make a mental note. And then once they're all together, we're into the cave proper. This little beam of light that we're seeing, these ropes up to safety, we're gone.
Yeah.
And we are now inside the cave. The character of the cave reveals itself.
Again, who does this for fun? I just can't. I have to say, I
Well,
can't.
imagine the people who do cave scuba diving.
Oh my gosh.
So let's add in oxygen as, and getting stuck underwater.
Yeah.
Like let's add another element to it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, hats off to anyone who's listening, or somebody who does that kind of stuff, because this is extreme exploration. Because, we're hinting at it. We eventually find out this is not the cave Juno said it was.
No.
We find out this is an unexplored cave, a system that has not been mapped, and she wants them as friends together, reunited, to get the glory of mapping this new system.
Exactly.
What could possibly go wrong, listeners?
And they were not happy.
No.
The group was not like, oh, great idea, Juno. Yay.
Maybe Holly secretly turned around and was like, yes.
Yeah. I think Holly would be the one who'd be like totally into it.
Yeah.
But I think Juno knew like she wouldn't be able to convince them otherwise,
But again, very villainous to get people
very
down
much.
all the way there without giving them full knowledge. These are supposed to be your friends.
That's unforgivable. And when you're doing an adventure sort of thing that puts your life very much at risk, absolutely not.
You need to trust everybody who's there. You need complete trust that you have each other's backs, that you have to communicate things very clearly. This is not how professionals do it.
And it's like, if we're going to map this cave together, then everybody should have a job and everybody shouldn't be coming in with that expectation. Yeah. And, so these other women are going down there thinking that this is an established cave, that there's a map, that there's a way out, and eventually gets to that point when they discover that no, that is not the case. And now you're going to have to remind me of because I know they already start having troubles.
In terms of getting through the cave or with each other?
Yeah. And with
I took some watch notes.
Yeah. Thank you. Because I am terrible at doing that. And so, chronology just kind of flies out the window.
I do want to say we missed a great moment that, again, isn't huge, but I just love it so much, is when they're all at the cabin before they go out, they all pose for this photo. And it's this great black and white photo of them. They're like leaning on the rail of this cabin and they're smiling and so excited.
It's a great moment.
And it fades or transitions into them going down that Forest Service road, and the dread music just kind of starts to grow.
Yes.
It's a wonderful transition. Again, so much atmosphere. I love it. Yeah. So they get into the end of the cave, and I think right away, one of the things they have to do is shimmy into this really tight hole.
Yes.
Like a person-sized hole.
And in fact, I think for the people who auditioned for this had to get through, that was part of the audition, was they had to shimmy through that tight space, or a space that was built like that. Like, we have to know you can even do this before we can continue on with the audition, which makes sense.
Absolutely. And so, we're seeing them kind of crawl through this tight area, and then Sarah, again, she's kind of looking around suspiciously. We think maybe she's seen something behind her. We don't quite know, but she goes in and has a panic attack.
Yes.
Effectively, because she gets stuck. And then Beth is a fucking trooper. Mm-hmm. So she comes back through and does this masterful job of helping her with the tension.
So good.
She's just brilliant. The way she's talking to her.
You've already been through the worst part of your life.
Yeah.
So.
And she's like, she tells a joke. She's like, you're going to have to breathe. They're going to have to take it. She's talking her through it. She's trying to get her mind off of it. She's, makes her laugh.
Yeah.
And she's just freaking genius. And finally they're able to get her through. Oh, it's a cave-in.
Yes, that's right. Because they know they can't go back.
So she gets out of there, and then some rocks fall into that little human-sized tunnel.
Yeah.
The only way out is through.
Yes.
So immediately once we're in this cave, it's not forgiving at all.
Yeah.
So it's not like halfway through we learn we can't go back. We're already in it till the bitter end, and this thing has just started.
Yeah. And again, it's such a brilliant pacing, because at no point does the movie let up, and it gives you just enough room to breathe, which again is like a lot of the areas in this cave. You have just enough room to breathe, if that, before things close in tighter or something else goes horribly wrong.
Yeah. I think this is where they find out they're not in the right cave because they're like, oh, we filed a flight plan, so rescue will come for us when we don't report in at our allotted time. Because when you do things like this,
it's all part of being a responsible
you go to a ranger
explorer.
station or some place, you file your plan, so they know if you don't show up, they need to come looking for you and where to go.
Right.
Also, Juno filed the wrong flight plan.
Oh, God.
So talk about, again, villainous. Like, are these really your friends? Even though she's a likable person, you can't not hate this woman for what she's done to these friends of hers.
Yes.
So basically, there's no rescue coming. So we learn that right away. And then we get to this crazy chasm they have to cross. Not a figurative one, a literal chasm.
No. No. Yeah. Explain this a little bit.
Yeah. So the cave they're going through, and it opens up to this giant pit. And they can see across the way the cave continues. And they drop something down. It's the classic movie thing where you drop
like
it,
glow sticks
and you're like,
elevator shaft and all that.
"Oh, this didn't land nearly as quickly as I wanted it to." So they have to do this process wherein they are putting these, I think they're called pitons, into the cave ceiling.
Yes.
So basically, one person has to venture out. They put him up into the ceiling as an anchor, run the rope through, and they got to keep doing this. The amount of upper arm strength you would have. And I mean, they show it pretty well in the movie where they are just like struggling through this. But Becca, ever the responsible one, she takes the lead and basically sets the ropes all the way across.
Yeah.
And then, the ladies start crossing. Well, at one point she notices there's a really old piton here. And it's like, I thought this was an unexplored cave. Why is there equipment here?
Because we already had the handprint in the beginning, and now we're seeing this. So there is already an indication that, yes, there have been people down here, but why isn't it established? Why isn't it mapped? Why indeed?
Mm-hmm. And then they realize they have to take everything back. So normally they would cross and leave all the gear there, but because they lost a rope bag and some other stuff, is it Juno at the end? She has to reclaim everything, and so she's doing that. And then there's this terrible scene where she falls and Becca gets like this awful rope burn.
Yes.
And I think it slices her hand open. I'm going to tell you right now, like, I cringe every time that comes on.
The first of many horrific injuries in this movie before anything takes off to the next level. I mean, I completely agree that is an injury that immediately, and when your hand's injured and you're climbing, that already puts you at a huge disadvantage. Yeah. So, I mean, you cannot afford to get hurt. Then add in all the extra anxiety you're dealing with, and you're just going to make mistakes. And, oh, God. Yeah.
So they're like, oh, my gosh, there's 100-year-old equipment here. Mm-hmm. Okay, so people have been here. That's good news. And someone's like, if someone got out, this cave's not named. So that seems to indicate whoever came in here did not get out.
Yeah.
And they even come across some cave drawings after that.
Yeah.
And it does show 2 openings. So they're like, oh, there's another end to the system. We just have to see it through.
Yeah.
That's going to be fine. And then we get a little bit of slobber and clicking. What is that?
A xenomorph.
Kind of.
Yeah.
They also have a lot of drool, don't they?
Yeah.
They got a little drool problem.
Yeah, little slime, little drool. I know there are moments apparently where, the people, well, the crawlers, as we'll eventually be talking more about them, where they're in parts of the shots that if you revisit it and study it very closely, you can maybe see or make out some stuff. Very clever parts of the shot that you may or may not miss, but you might get a sense of movement or something, an interesting shape. But yes, already starting to get a sense that, okay, here we are. We have, we're stuck in this cave. We have to go out. It's never been mapped. We don't know what's ahead of us.
Yeah.
We don't even know what's 10 feet ahead of us. What could possibly make this worse?
Well, Juno's trying to do the whole lighter to find the wind, because that's going to indicate where air is traveling to. Mm-hmm. So they're doing that. They're trying to find a way. Well, Holly starts to lose her mind and thinks she sees daylight.
And which is kind of understandable. It's almost like being in the desert and thinking you see water.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she goes running and falls and...
Oh, God.
you hear this crunch.
This is the injury that it's seared in my brain.
Because you see her bones protruding from her leg.
Very bad compound fracture.
My God. It is. It's so hard to watch.
It's the kind of injury that is fatal if not attended to. This is not, a simple, when a bone breaks through the skin, you've automatically opened yourself up to massive infection. And here you are down in this fucking cave out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Who knows what's creeping and crawling that's down there. So yeah. And how are you going to crawl? How are you going to move? And then the way they address this injury.
I mean, they have to snap it back into place.
Dear God.
Sam is, I think, a medical professional.
Yeah.
Or she's learning to be one, or I can't quite remember if they specify, but she's basically in doctor mode. And again, she does this great job, kind of like Beth did with de-escalation. She's doing it with like, here's what I'm going to do. This is going to hurt. They're doing the whole brace for it. And you get the whole scene where they crunch the thing back into place, and they make a little like tourniquet for her and everything. And it is just, it's brutal.
Very brutal.
Oh my gosh. It's very visceral. But then Sarah hears a child's laughter. Now, I think she's already been thinking or seeing, not like actually seeing in the scene, but it's almost like she closes her eyes and pictures her daughter.
Her daughter. We're getting a lot of, you could almost call it a vision or foreshadowing or just where her mind is.
Yeah.
And it kind of like gives you a good reminder that her daughter's never far from her thoughts or she's being constantly haunted and for lack of a better word, by memories or visions of her daughter.
Yeah. And we find some like a rusted miner's helmet. This is where you're starting to be like, okay, something else is here. Something else is going on.
Yeah.
And then we get a little bit of a creature.
Yeah, okay. And here is the moment, the beautiful thing. And of course, this trick was used in Alien. It's been used in a lot of horror movies involving a creature where something's there because obviously you've read the script, but you haven't seen the actual creature. The women, the actors, had not seen what these creatures look like.
Which is such a great idea. They had no idea what to expect. I think they knew they would encounter something, but they had never seen the actors. They had never seen a design of the creature.
And great lengths were gone to keep them separated from the other cast members. And so then when they finally encounter these things, the reaction is very genuine. They were freaked the hell out.
They were freaked the hell out.
Yeah, the interviews that they gave and stuff about, their first encounter with these was, that was very genuine. Yeah. I think one of them said she about pissed herself. Yeah.
I think it was the actor who played Judo. I think she was she's like, I about peed myself. But yeah, and of course they do it in a great way, which is they have a camera because they're wanting to document this exploration. Yeah. So it's the very classic, we're going to see the creature not through our own eyes, but through the little screen in infrared. So it's just in green, and the way the creature is standing, it's like it's straight up and the head is like tilted down to the side and the mouth is just sort of gaping open.
Yep.
And it's not very far from one of our heroes. And you're just like, holy fuck.
Yeah. And I will say, too, one thing that Neil Marshall had done when they film these creatures, he actually speeds up the film and cuts some frames out. So it's always it's a little faster, a little herky-jerky. It's very unsettling to the eye. So
it's not quite a strobe light effect, but it almost has that like flickering, like you're missing some of the
exactly,
footage in there. So
which is just brilliant because it's kind of when you are genuinely in a moment of terror, it's kind of how your brain reacts. It does that kind of on its own too. So
I should say this is about the 50-minute mark.
So, and this movie it's like 2 hours, maybe a little under. I don't think it's that long. Maybe it's
I thought it was more traditional length.
Maybe it's more like an hour 40 or hour 45.
Oh, it's an hour 40.
Okay. Yeah. So perfect length, honestly, especially for a movie like this. Yeah. 50 minutes in, we are finally seeing, okay, we've established then we have horrible, grievous injuries here. We are lost. We are in the dark. We are stuck. And now creatures.
And we can't go back.
Yeah.
So we have to go through these creatures if we're ever hoping to find.
And they didn't
the
exactly
end.
come down there with guns.
Oh, I guess they had their climbing axes.
Yeah, they have their climbing axes.
Which do prove helpful.
Yes, they, so they do have some, melee capability.
Right.
I'm talking like a gamer here.
Like a little Left 4 Dead scenario. Yeah.
But I mean, at this point, we're starting to really connect the dots because once we encounter these guys, we start to feel like this is why nobody got out. If there were explorers down here, well, these creatures are very pale. And they communicate with the clicks because as something that evolved in the dark, it probably doesn't have very good eyesight.
Well, their eyes are they have eyes
and
sockets, but they're kind of like milky, like you can tell that they are getting around by echolocation.
Exactly.
And, that's so they're making the clicking noises. That's what we've been kind of hearing. And, you can even see with the way that the actors in the suits are kind of moving and tilting their head. They're sort of using it to hear. And apparently Neil had said that the concept is these were ancient humans that never left the cave. So they're not aliens. They're not a different species.
Right.
They were kind of an offshoot of humans.
Yeah,
I think he said like over 10,000 years ago.
Exactly. Like imagine a caveman that never got out of the cave.
Right.
And then of course they reproduce down there and whatnot. And apparently they're just not very nice.
Well, to be fair, this is a home invasion story.
That is very true. Oh my gosh. That's very true.
If you think about it.
I mean, stand your ground.
If somebody came into your house and they're like, I'm just urban exploring, and you'd be like, you just broke into my house.
I'm literally going to start eating you.
Now,
right
I don't
here.
know if you would jump on them and rip their neck off with your teeth, but I guess you reserve the right to in the line of defense.
No jury would ever convict me.
But yeah, it's just, I think, a brilliant... Well, I'll say this much. What I love about this movie is there's already so much horror without ever seeing a creature.
Yeah.
50 minutes in, I'm already terrified. I have a question. Could this movie work with no creature?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Okay.
I do think...
So it's more of a like human versus nature kind of a story.
It would turn into something...
Or like they think they see something, we see glimmers of a thing, but we never get confirmation that anything's down there. So once again, are they descending into madness, or is there something down there a little Blair Witch-like?
A little bit. I think it could have worked. I know we go back and forth a little bit. We've mentioned a lot about sort of the beauty of not seeing the baddie, the Jaws technique. We don't see the shark until the very end, really, or you just see evidence of the shark, but you don't see the shark.
Yeah.
I do feel like that first sighting of the creature, pretty damn terrifying. That got me.
Oh yeah.
I don't know that I needed to see any more of it, but just more the evidence of it. So I like seeing that in the night vision. And then I feel like we probably could have dialed back even though, of course, like seeing them running in the shadows or running out of a shot or, hearing them, eating and, doing whatever. And they do plenty of that. I do feel like the film became even more memorable though, because of that encounter. But do I feel like it was absolutely necessary? No. I felt like they could have maybe found another way to dial up, or maybe there was just someone down. Maybe it was just like one crazy mother effer down there that was tormenting them. You're in some way.
Deciding not to cuss on the podcast now?
No, I can fucking cuss. No. No, but I do feel like their reasoning for bringing those creatures in there made a lot of sense, because it's like that whole idea of, we got to make this even worse than it already is, because this is about as bad as it can possibly get.
Right.
And then somebody's like, oh, I don't know. I think we can absolutely make it way worse. And so we can just have these creatures down there that are, going to terrorize and feast upon them. But I don't know. I think it's absolutely a valid criticism of the movie to say that they overuse it or expose them, for lack of a better word.
I mean, certainly it doesn't adhere to the less is more scenario, like you said, like Jaws. The less you see, the more terrifying it gets. You know, it doesn't adhere to that. It goes in a direction I wish it didn't go.
Yeah.
I don't know if it makes it not as good of a movie, but it wasn't the movie I wanted, given how amazing the first 50 minutes are.
It goes from psychological horror to like a horror thriller at that point.
And it gets gory.
Yes.
It gets real gory.
Very much so.
I mean, not that bones protruding from the leg is not,
There's plenty of visceral stuff leading up to the crawlers.
But that's all real as well. Like, anyone who's going to go cave diving today, those are real hazards. I'm going to guess you're not going to run into prehistoric cavemen, but...
I mean, I did say, like, the movie becomes more terrifying after they come in, only because now they have this enemy in there that they have to fight. However, there's something about it that became lesser, that sort of internal horror took a back seat because now they're facing this very external element. And I think that might be where it kind of, I won't say it lost me, but I detached a little bit from it at that point.
And the cave doesn't become this menace any longer. It's now fully these creatures. Whereas before, the cave was the
very much,
whatever you want to call it, antagonist, or the thing that they had to continually survive against. The cave no longer really becomes that. It's truly, can I survive these creatures?
Yes.
And so I think, just making that shift is sort of what it does. I wanted to mention this here. Neil had credited 3 movies as inspiration. Did you read this or see this?
I know I saw it. I didn't write it down, though.
So he said it was Alien for the atmosphere, dark and menace, Deliverance for an adventure trip gone wrong, and The Shining for someone going insane.
Absolutely.
And I would say he hits all of those marks very well.
And I absolutely respect that, because what we have here ultimately is someone who had a very strong vision, and they fully realized it. Like, I never got a sense that he was ever out of control of what he was doing.
Nope.
You can often feel that in a movie, like where you could feel that it kind of lags a little, or it feels like they're just throwing anything at the wall to see what'll stick. When you mention those 3 inspirations, they are very clearly there, and they are very flawlessly executed to that extent. Now, as far as like the effect on the audience, it's gonna absolutely vary, like in terms of how people feel about the creature element,
right?
Because it does change the whole tone and pace of the film at this point. Because I love Alien, and I love all those movies that you mentioned. Deliverance, fantastic, but I would say that the thing that makes Alien good isn't necessarily the alien. Like the atmosphere of it is great. The characters are great. And again, not seeing it makes it scarier. There are parts of, not to make this a show about Alien, and you already have an amazing episode on Alien on your show, 80s High. Go listen to it. But
Season 2, Episode 1.
Yes, thank you. Fantastic episode. I learned a lot listening to that one. But like the moment in Alien where it's just when they're tracking them on the ship, and you could see the little radar, and of course the acid blood dripping and burning through the floors. Like, that's the horrifying part of the creature in Alien that makes it scary. Not seeing the Giger, suit person, and it's really in the first movie, the alien doesn't really look very. It's iconic, but it's not as scary. It's a little more better constructed and executed in Aliens.
Listen, there's a mouth with a little mouth. If that doesn't terrify you, I don't know what does, folks.
A mouth coming out of a little mouth, and then there's a little mouth in that mouth.
My mouth has mouth, my pecs have pecs.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, you're right. Totally, this movie turns into mayhem at this point.
Yeah.
Pretty much until the very end.
Yeah.
We get a few moments to breathe, but it is freaking chaos.
We were like heavy metal at this point. Like,
I mean, you might as well be... Yeah. And sadly, Holly goes quick, which... Unfortunately, given her injury, is not surprising.
Right.
She's not going to be able to really defend herself. And it, like, rips a chunk of her neck off.
Oh, damn. Yeah.
Like I said, it gets gory at this point. We see that crawling that you mentioned where it's like, it's just the shutter effect, or I don't even know what you would call that, but like
Yeah.
you said, it was like sped up and missing frames. Just the way it was shot was great.
Yeah.
Those climbers axes like saved the day. But we get also a second brutal death.
Yeah.
So Juno
Oh, God.
has her pickaxe. She's fighting him off. One of them comes up behind her. She spins around.
Oh,
And
God.
slams the axe right into the throat of Beth.
Beth. Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
This is, and you can see the terror on both of their faces as to what
Yes.
happened. You know Juno didn't do it on purpose.
Yeah.
You know she's not the true villain. Obviously, she's made a lot of shitty decisions and
Horrible.
she's put all of her friends in this situation.
Yeah.
But you know she didn't like lure him down there to kill him. She's with the cave people.
Yeah.
But you see this just look on their faces as she's like choking. And then Juno, what did she do when her best friend died? You know, she
Yeah.
ran from the funeral.
Yep.
She does the whole classic back away.
Yeah.
Beth is like, don't leave me, don't leave me. And
Yeah.
she
runs. Yeah.
basically does the old, I'm going to walk backwards.
Yeah. Because Juno, I mean, it's weird, like the combination of that sort of bravado that she has combined with like emotional cowardice.
Yeah.
It's really like, she's almost like a man.
Well,
mean-
it's funny. Well, she definitely doesn't want to admit her mistakes,
Yeah.
right? Like she doesn't want to own up to what she's done and the true peril she's put everybody in. She doesn't want to own up to the fact in this situation that she killed somebody. So much so that she's just going to back away. And I guess, well, no, I don't guess. I know she blames it on the crawler.
crawler,
Actually,
yeah.
no, she doesn't. She's very clever in how she says it. Beth
Yeah.
didn't make it. Like,
Yeah.
because I think later on, Sarah and her re-team up after a lot more chaos. And, you know, it's like, oh, so such and such is dead. What about Beth? She didn't make it.
Yeah.
Juno is very good about not lying. She's just massaging the truth.
Lying by omission.
Yeah. And so you see a lot of that. And it's not as if she backs away with anything other than absolute horror at what she's doing.
Oh, it's
but
and
she
again,
still does it.
on a deeply human level, we all get it.
Yeah.
In
Oh, yeah.
that moment, in the heat of that moment. I mean, shit. Anybody who's ever played a video game and with someone and done friendly fire on them, you know, like you could totally see how that would happen down there in that moment. But again, it's like another check mark against. And honestly, if it's one of those moments that forces you to have a uncomfortable question with yourself about what would I do in that scenario if I had accidentally done something like that.
Right.
Would I not possibly behave similarly? I don't know. I mean, especially if I already know I'm in deep shit with the friends that I have. Do I go like, yeah, I accidentally stabbed Beth in the neck, you know, with my pickaxe because I thought it was a creature.
Well, and if you know she's going to die and you don't know the way out, your brain has to be on some level at its survival core saying, I mean, it's every person for themselves,
Yeah,
right?
very much so.
We've played a co-op game we were talking about where it descends into like teamwork gets you so far.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the end, you have your own goals to figure out. And it's kind of every character for themselves.
Yes.
And that would be life at a survival level like this.
Yeah.
An instinctual level. She's gone. Should I
Yes.
comfort her? Probably. But
Yeah.
will that put me at risk?
We could both die. Absolutely. Like you have, if you're still alive, if you have what it takes to keep going, then you keep going.
It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You need to take care of your base needs before you can attend to higher level and emotional support for a dying friend. It sounds callous, but also like if we were in that scenario, we can't all sit here and confidently say, well, I would do it differently.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you I guess you could try to convince yourself of that, but
And I think it was really well done too with the whole "don't leave me," you know, too, because here's Beth, like she's terrified.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's automatically that she feels betrayed in that moment, but of course you don't want to be alone, and you think, well, maybe I can. I don't know. I think they played it so well. I think it was done
brilliant.
in such a really emotionally truthful way. And again, it hasn't really made a misstep on that front at all. And one reason why this continues to be such a strong movie.
yeah. So yeah, like the sisters go off together and they do a hide thing where the creature's like crawling right over them. And they sort of figure out it's echolocation. They can't see, but that's really creepy because it's literally on top of them and like screeching and clicking and
Dear
it's
God.
wild. You know, Sarah comes to and she fashions a torch. She ends up finding Beth and she's still alive.
Yes.
She's her throat's pierced and all she says is, she did this to me. She left me. Don't trust her.
Oh,
and then
boy.
There's this pendant that Juno has, and she opens her hand and the pendant's there because in there, when Juno accidentally stabbed her, somehow she like
grabbed her necklace.
She grabbed the necklace and like pulled it off of her.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like the proof that Juno had done it to her.
Yeah.
Oh boy. So,
and that comes back, of course, later. Chekhov's necklace.
Yeah. We get some great killing and whatnot, and what we definitely get is Sarah runs into a pit of blood,
like a bloody pool. Like it is, it's one of those set pieces that feels as much for effect on both the viewer and just cinematically, like it looks cool. But yeah, it is basically like it's a red bloody pit.
And I guess we forgot the most important part. Sarah does what Juno could not do. Mm-hmm. She actually crushes Beth's skull to spare her the agony
of mercy killing.
Eaten alive or whatever. So Sarah does the whole thing where you defy, again, Maslow's hierarchy. You defy your baser needs of survival for a greater, higher level purpose.
Right.
Which I suppose one could say is a demonstration of character or whatever.
It's the hero move.
Mm-hmm.
And as Sarah is again going on her own kind of like deep emotional descent. I mean, well, in some ways she was already at the bottom when this started, and she's just finding that it can go even deeper. It just shows that even in her darkest, lowest moment, there's still something in her that Juno doesn't have.
Yeah.
Which says a lot.
Yeah, and so she's in this blood swamp. She comes out, a creature comes by. She puts like an antler in its eye.
Yeah.
She's doing this whole playing dead. She's slashing it. She's turning into like
she's
a
like
badass.
She has gone like full Ripley at this point.
Oh, she had like bright eyes at one point. Mm-hmm. I was ready for the ring from Kill Bill. I was just ready for it because she has like blonde hair, kind of like Uma did in that movie. And she's just, again, drenched in blood like Uma was at the end of, volume 1. It was just like look in her eyes. And I was like, you're right. It's full Ripley, full Bride. It's
or
just
like or Carrie. That's another great, that covered in blood, but also like, I've had enough of this shit. She's in take no prisoners mode at this point. And she's like that as well, equally because what she knows about what happened to Beth, but also being down there. Yeah. And really, she's probably, I think, in a lot of those moments thinking of Juno.
I mean, it might be like, that's the fuel to get her through is like,
you got us down here.
Yeah.
And, now this.
And after a couple creature kills, we get the classic one where she's standing on this slanted rock. Mm-hmm. She's torch in one hand, pickaxe in the other, covered in blood, screaming out into the cave. Like, you're like, okay, sisters... starting to lose it.
Yeah. And I mean, really, she's in there's your Shining reference right there too, of slowly going insane. But there's an interesting twist to that we'll get, in terms of how it ties into the original ending, which we're not quite at yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sarah is definitely going through a bit of a metamorphosis here. Now, what happens after that? Because we do have
we lose the sisters.
So
I think they're trying to go back to the chasm. Mm-hmm. I don't know why they're trying to. I think they're looking for a way out. They can't find it. They make their way back to the chasm. One of them tries to jump, and a creature, because they've taken those ropes down. So one of them jumps to try to get across, and is hanging there, and the creature comes and kills her, and so she's just left dangling.
Yeah.
I think Becca gets her throat ripped out. Yep. So the sisters are gone.
And then there were 2.
And Juno shows up and I think helps dispatch them. Mm-hmm. And then Sarah catches up to her, and this is where she's girlfriend's looking insane.
Yeah.
And she asks about Beth. Juno says she didn't make it. And Sarah says, you saw her die? Mm-hmm. And Juno nods yes. And I was like,
Also
you've been
kinda
caught
true.
in your final lie, bitch.
Yeah.
I wrote bitch.
Did you write it? That's great.
You've been caught in your final lie, bitch. So now we're down to basically, can these two escape?
Yeah.
And arguably, these have been the two most capable fighters. Despite a few things that Juno has done, she's also,
Right.
taken no guff from these creatures. She's taken them down as well.
She's such an interesting character in terms of how, at this point, she's like a morally neutral. That's being kind in some ways, but I would say she is a neutral. Like if you're doing that character class, like she's the character alignment, the lawful good and whatnot. She is right in that neutral territory in terms of the morals and how we kind of in her character and how we feel about her. But at the same time, it's like we want her to get out. I mean, do we want? Yeah, we want her to get out. I at this point, or at least help Sarah get out.
Yeah.
Because she definitely needs to get out.
Yeah, we get a great action sequence. I think Sarah bites a piece of one of the crawlers off.
Yes.
She jams her fingers into the eyes of another.
Yep.
Juno delivers the torch down the throat of one of them.
It's
and
great.
then an axe pierces to the brain. It's like a blood fountain. Sarah's spitting on the carcass. She's like full badass, but also kind of full crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And there's this great moment where they've kind of dispatched all the crawlers that are there. She's standing there. Her axe is poised and she's staring down at Juno. And in her hand, you just see the pendant kind of fall. Juno sees it.
Yeah.
She's like, oh boy. And she puts an axe through Juno's leg.
Yeah.
And then backs away. Does she take her axe?
Well, I thought her axe... Does she still have her axe? Or does
she has her
Juno?
own.
No, she does take Juno's axe. She does. She
Okay.
leaves her unarmed. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because I think she picks up Nope. Juno pulls it out of her own leg.
Oh,
she has to pull
does?
it out of her own leg.
Oh,
Yep.
That's right.
Sorry, this is why I'm glad I took notes because I'm like,
glad
there's
you
so
did
many
too.
little beats I forgot.
Yeah.
So she pulls it out of there and Sarah goes running and she sees daylight.
Yes. And this hill, like when she's running up this pile of
It's a bone staircase.
Yes.
Which you have to imagine these creatures are coming out to the surface to hunt or to lure things down there. And this has just been centuries probably of all these kills. It's just it's a bone staircase is like the best way to put it. And she's like tearing up this thing. She's freaking out. And you see this great shot of her hand come out of this like moss.
Yes.
And
daylight.
Just, her gasping for like fresh air. You have to imagine this stale cave air, this musty, and then the smell of all this death and blood.
Felt that, like that moment, that first glimpse of daylight and real air and green.
Oh my God. We're back to that blue-green again because down in the cave it's been
red,
dark reds because of the flares. You get a little bit of greens from some of the glow sticks.
Yeah.
But it's been, these warm colors primarily. Yeah. And then like the blue green, or I'm sorry, and the blue gray of this like washed out atmosphere. Suddenly
that looks like paradise. Yeah. like what looked so foreboding and terrifying coming in just looks like the most welcome thing you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah. And she's like the actor, she just freaking nails it.
Yeah.
The way she's like gasping and like you just have to imagine adrenaline is blasting through her entire body. All those other hormones and neurotransmitters that are like firing in the red. Right. And she's just running through the woods. Somehow makes it back to the car. This part I didn't quite understand because she would have ended up somewhere else. I get it. It's a little bit of movie whatnot, but they kind of traveled a distance.
They did.
The fact that she would know how to get back, I was like, I'll let it go.
And see, this is where things diverge.
Well, okay.
Right?
This is a fair point. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, because there are two endings to this movie.
So let's put a pin in how she gets back to it, I guess, right?
Yeah, well, what you're definitely describing is we're going down the American ending or the theatrical American.
We can do both at the same time, actually.
I guess we could.
Yeah, they overlap until they don't. So she runs back. She gets to the car. Yeah. She goes flying out of there. And again, we get that moment where she finally leaves the Forest Service road onto a regular road. I have felt that relief.
Yes.
Granted, I did not have murder and monsters behind me. But after a long, grueling hike over multiple days, you're freaking tired.
Yes.
You just want to take your hiking boots off and let your feet breathe. And you're going down this bumpy ass road and you're like, I need some civilization.
Yeah. Yeah.
I need lunch. I need whatever. And you hit that paved road and the feeling is just so ridiculously pleasing.
Absolutely.
And so I could empathize with that, again, let alone what she was dealing with. And she's driving down these roads. She finally gets away and she pulls over. And like you would imagine, she loses it. She's made it away. Mm-hmm. She's got her distance and she just freaking breaks down. She's screaming. She's crying. She's everything. And then the movie does this asshole thing where a truck comes up behind her.
Yeah.
And you almost think it's going to hit her. It doesn't, but it drives by and it freaks you out. And then I think she like vomits out the door or whatever.
Yeah.
And then she comes back into we're kind of outside the door with her. She's like, Ralphing over the window. And she sits back in her seat. And Juno
is there.
A dead Juno.
Very creepy.
A decayed body Juno is sitting right next to her in the seat. And I believe that's where the American version ends.
Yes, because we see her, honestly, this is the funny part, right? Because the original ending, which we'll get to in a second, the one that aired in the UK and that, is...
the true ending.
The true ending of the film... For some reason, when they tested it with American studio test audiences here, they thought that the original ending was too bleak. But the funny thing to me is that this is the bleakest possible ending because what it means is she gets out and this character never really resolved any of her inner conflict. If anything, it's worse because they show, throughout this whole movie, Sarah has been running from the darkness, running. And then she's in it and she's fighting her way out of it, both internally and externally.
Yeah.
And then she gets out only to find that she has never escaped mentally and she has to live with all of this. It is not a resolved ending and it is not a happy, quote unquote, ending. This is not a sunshiny ending. It almost feels like whenever the studio told Marshall that he had to cut a different ending for the American audience, he's like, they want a happy ending. Yeah, here's their happy ending. And there's nothing about this ending that is good in terms of for the character. However,
I mean, it could also even introduce a supernatural element. Like now she's being haunted by this ghost of Juno. Like you don't know because there's no earthly reason she would actually be there. So Sarah's either
or her mind is so broken,
I mean, that's the other option. She's either lost her mind and she's hallucinating this person or she's being haunted by the actual spirit.
Yes.
And to your point, neither of these are cheery.
Right.
I know. This is a very substandard ending. Sorry, you were going to say something.
I agree. No, it is to me. It feels very subversive by the part of Neil Marshall to have, given us this ending as an answer to what the studio was demanding of something with a more positive spin on it. Because to me, it's both worse in terms of just the storytelling, and it also doesn't serve whatever purpose that the American audiences thought that they wanted. This was the ending, of course, that I saw in the theater. And of course I was like, that's a classic ending for a horror movie, I guess. Now, it didn't ruin the movie. I still, walking out of that theater after seeing this, it was very similar. This was when I was living in Washington, so it was very dreary and very rainy that day. I remember it was very cloudy, but was stepping outside and getting out of that dark theater and getting that first breath of fresh air outside was the most tremendous breath I'd ever taken. And I still remember it. I still felt the weight fall off of me, and I drove home just feeling very haunted and shaken by the experience. But I feel like if I had seen the original ending in the theater, and we can go and take that away, because like Chris said earlier, they overlap until they don't. And so It doesn't end at that point, because what does the UK ending do? It cuts back to Sarah in the cave.
She's at the bottom of that bone staircase.
Yes. She never got out.
Nope.
And she had been seeing these visions of her daughter, and there was this whole birthday cake element that was interesting as well. And I because he keeps seeing these candles on a birthday cake.
And it's very dark shot with the daughter and the cake lit up by these orange candles.
Yes.
So again, the orange candle light, the light they have down in the cave is very similar.
Mm-hmm. As throughout the movie, as Sarah has been seeing this, she seems disturbed by it. She seems like she doesn't want to see it. It feels like an unwelcome kind of a thing, or something that disturbs her in some way.
Yeah.
But by this point, what Sarah ends up doing is she stares at it, like with this smile on her face. It's almost like she embraces.
Yeah, we see her kind of go up to this vision of her daughter. And this time it's like the daughter's there in the cave with her.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And she crawls over to where her daughter is. And I think she goes to like blow out the candles.
Yeah.
And you're right. She has this little like kind of smile on her face. Very subtle. And then we zoom back and the light is not from candles on a birthday cake.
No.
It's just her torchlight.
Yeah.
And she's staring at nothing.
Yeah.
And then I think we hear screams from the cave crawlers.
And that's it.
And that's it.
And
she's still down there.
It is such a good ending. I love this.
Because basically she's hallucinated this entire escape.
Yes. And in some ways, it's almost like, because this resolves her inner conflict. She is no longer running from the thing that scares her, the thing that she doesn't want. Of course, she's going to die down there, or maybe she won't. Maybe she'll become Queen Cave Lady. Who even knows? We don't know. But the beauty of it is you don't, because it's unresolved in terms of the plot, but it is more poignant in a huge way. And it's almost like, yeah, I'm going out, but I'm at peace, which is kind of like almost just more gratifying than seeing her immersed in this horrible mental turmoil and agony of the American ending, where she's seeing a hallucination and screaming and freaking the hell out. Nothing's been resolved for her, but here she has finally just gotten to this point where she's like, you know what, fuck it. It's just one of those, it's that, you know what, fuck it ending. And where she's like, I'm here with my daughter, and who cares? It's almost like an Inception where, is it a dream or not? And that's all I'm going to say. And I don't want to spoil that, but it's almost like by a certain point, it doesn't matter because you've already resolved the thing in you. So what is reality? I mean, it is one of those things, like, you could philosophize on that if you want to, but I love an ending that does that. And people might find that dissatisfying, but I guess it depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say she found peace. I feel like she went full on crazy. And is so delusional at this point that she doesn't know reality anymore.
Well, you embrace the madness. You fall fully into it. You take the Nestea plunge into crazy town. But maybe there is also that element of letting go that can just, it's sad and terrible, but hey, I'm no longer struggling. So
and I will say the credits start beautifully where you go back to that photo of all these women standing on the porch of this when everything was innocent. They were going to go on this little adventure, and oh my, how far we've come.
And I think it's safe to say that cave is not going to be mapped, although the existence of the American movie gave rise to the sequel.
And to be honest with you, the UK ending does not omit the possibility of a sequel either, because
I guess not.
She's right there by the exit.
That's true.
She's gone Looney Tunes. We just don't know what happens to her.
That's true.
So it doesn't, the UK ending is not necessarily at odds with the sequel, which, we should just be very clear. Neil Marshall saw this as a self-contained story and said there was no need for a sequel.
Yeah.
But one was made. I've seen it once. And, it's fine for what it is. I don't consider it necessary viewing. If you like the original and you're content with it, you can leave it at that.
Yeah.
I can't say it does a lot of whole new stuff.
Yeah.
but it's out there. And I saw it because I liked the movie so much and I was curious. I was like, it's the same thing with The Ring. I was like, this movie didn't need a sequel, but it's out there. So I'm, of course, going to go watch it. And similarly, I'm just like, it's not terrible, but it's not necessary. It didn't really do anything.
And it didn't do well either. I mean, obviously, I didn't know there was a sequel. When did that even come out?
The sequel came out in 2009, so about 3 years later.
Man, I completely lost.
And it was directed by John Harris, and Harris had worked, I can't remember what his role is, but Harris was on the original.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what his role was with it, but yeah, I mean, it kind of picks up where this one leaves off. We see characters go back into that cave. I think it tries to give more explanation as to what's going on, but that's really, in my view, that's not the purpose of horror, is to provide further explanation.
Right, exactly.
You know, that it takes away the excitement of not knowing. Mm-hmm. It takes away the mystery. And it's like when you see the thing, it's no longer, you now know the shape of it. There's something to be said about not knowing the shape of a thing.
It points to Neil Marshall's sensibilities, because there was a part in The Descent where the women were trying to discuss how the crawlers might have gotten down there and you know, the evolutionary aspect of it and everything. But he was like, no, we're cutting that because it's just that kind of exposition doesn't help the movie.
Nope.
And so it's similar when Rob Zombie went and remade Halloween and gave Michael Myers this whole tragic, stereotypical little kid backstory of abusive mom or abusive stepdad and stripper mom. You know, like, oh, no wonder he became a killer kind of thing. And it's just like, we don't need to know. This doesn't make Michael Myers scarier. And in fact, it makes him less scary.
Yeah.
So either you're trying to scare us or you're trying to get us to sympathize. It's hard to combine those two things effectively. Mm-hmm. So especially when it comes to a villain. But anyway, I'm off on a tangent on that. But again, it just feels like this movie, the sequel, would have been very hard to match what this movie accomplished. And again, I feel like this movie stands alone. It's a masterpiece. It's inspired a lot of movies and inspired a lot of directors since. And it's on so many top 10 lists, I think, of best horror movies, or top 20 lists or whatever, for damn good reason. This movie just it combines all the elements that you want out of a great scary movie, you know, in terms of the characters and the effects and the atmosphere.
Yeah, and I'll say for this one too, this is a movie I've had for a long time, so I actually have it on DVD. And I don't own much physical media anymore when it comes to shows or movies, but this has a lot of great extras on it.
Nice.
It has a feature beneath the scenes rather than behind, which I thought was funny.
I like that.
There's 2 audio commentaries, which I didn't get a chance to re-listen to. One is, I think, with Neil and some other folks who did more of the production one. I think there's a cast one.
Oh, nice.
That Neil may also be on. I can't remember. I wanted to watch those, but just didn't really have time for it. And then there's even some other extras, some like extended scenes and such.
Right.
So I will say, if you're into physical media and you like this one, I'm sure if there's a Blu-ray version, it would be similar. But the extras on this were really solid.
Oh, and I even loved learning like things that I didn't know too when I was background researching this, is that this movie was all the cave scenes were filmed on a soundstage. Yep. This was all built.
Yep.
Like, that's amazing to me. And I mean, yeah, it would have been very hard to get a film crew into a real cave, but there was never a moment really in any of that where I felt like it wasn't in a genuine location. So again,
they even did some clever things where like it was the same set that they just lit differently or shot from a different angle, because they wanted to build some more sets, and just they didn't have the budget for it, so they had to be very creative, but you wouldn't know. They just dressed it differently, again, different angle, different lighting, different whatever, and to you it's like they're down in that cave, they're down in there for real. They found a spot to go to, you know. And
it follows a lot of the rules that we talked about that make found footage movies so good. And I think another reason why maybe it appeals to both of us.
True.
I mean, we have a cast of characters that are largely unknowns. I didn't recognize any of these actors in this movie when I saw it. And it also, a lot of the shooting, a lot of the shots feel like, again, that voyeuristic angles or camera footage or film through alternate lenses, things that make it feel like you're watching it through a different lens. And then the jump scares. It has fantastic jump scares. It has those fantastic moments where you don't have the right POV, but you know something is just out of the peripheral, but you know something is there. Something that, again, found footage really does. And of course, that element of claustrophobia that a great found footage movie will usually give you. And so to me, it's almost like an interesting, where he saw some of the strengths of that subgenre and kind of pulled that in, because it can be so effectively done without, using that full device.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh man. Well, we descended. Are we ready to try to climb up the Bone Mountain out of and out of this into the sunlight?
It's everyday life, just trying to climb that bone staircase, get a little fresh air and sunshine.
Yeah.
No, this is great. I'm so glad we decided to talk about this, and obviously great that we get to do another episode in person. It's only the second time we've been able to do this.
I know.
And what a better topic to do it for. We both just have such a love of this movie, and I think you're so right. It shares a lot of features of why I love found footage so much. And I just happened to do it in a way that wasn't that same subgenre, but capture the atmosphere so brilliantly. So if you have not seen The Descent, do yourself a favor.
Yes.
Go check it out.
And as of this recording, I believe it is streaming on Shudder. And I think maybe a couple other of the streamers like Tubi and whatnot. So, but Shudder definitely has it. So get on there and watch it, or find a copy. But yeah, occasionally here on Ding Dong Darkness Time, we love to talk about scary movies. So this is one of my top favorites of all time. So yeah, glad we got to do this one.
So great.
And if you have a scary movie you want us to talk about, or if you've been caving and you want to talk about your experiences, give me a shout. Send me an email at dddarknesstime@gmail.com. You can reach out to me on the Facebook page and the Twitters. I don't know how to end my show again. This is the first recording I've done since going on hiatus, so I don't know if it's going to air in order, but yeah, that's a great way to get back into the swing of things. But we will be back with another fantastic dark topic in the very near future. In the meantime, have a good one.
Be good, you little ding-dongs.
Dang Skippy. Ding Dong Darkness Time has been brought to you and produced by yours truly, Allison Dixon. It was made possible by an array of amazing co-hosts, friends, family, but especially you, the listeners. Big shouts also go out to the brilliant Nathaniel Dixon for the show art and future legend Spencer Morlock for all the music. I'll be back again soon with another episode. In the meantime, be good, you little ding-dongs.